The summer sun hung heavy over my backyard, a relentless golden haze that turned the air thick and sticky. I stretched out on the chaise by my pool, the red bikini clinging to my skin like a second layer, damp from the heat. My legs, long and tanned from mornings spent jogging the quiet streets of this sleepy southern suburb, glistened under the light. I tipped my sunglasses down, letting them rest on the bridge of my nose, and took a slow sip of iced tea, the glass sweating against my palm. The ice clinked softly, a small rebellion against the oppressive warmth. Around me, the neighborhood hummed its usual tune. Somewhere a lawnmower growled, a dog barked lazily, and the breeze rustled the magnolia leaves shading my fence. It was the kind of stillness I'd craved after weeks of boardroom battles and city noise, a chance to shed the polished armor of Grace Harper, marketing exec, and just be. I'd bought this house 5 years ago, a sanctuary tucked away from the chaos of Atlanta with its sprawling deck and shimmering pool. Today it felt like mine alone. No clients, no deadlines, just the sun kissing my shoulders and the faint scent of chlorine in the air. I adjusted the strap of my bikini, feeling the fabric tug against the curve of my chest, and let my head tip back, soaking in the quiet. That's when I felt it. A shift, like the air itself was holding its breath. My eyes flicked open behind the tinted lenses, and I caught a shadow stretching long and lean across the wooden fence separating my yard from the neighbors. Lucas stood there, framed by the patio door of his mom's house next door. I hadn't heard him come home. College must have let out early this year. He was taller than I remembered, broader too, his shoulders filling out a faded gray tank top that stuck to his chest with a sheen of sweat. Lacrosse, I figured. He'd been on the team at Georgia Tech, and it showed in the way his arms flexed as he leaned against the railing, a water bottle dangling from his hand. His dark hair was mussed, falling just over his brow, and his eyes, those sharp hazel eyes, locked onto me with a boldness that sent a shiver skittering down my spine, despite the 90-degree heat. "Hey, Grace," he called, his voice carrying over the fence, low and easy like he belonged here. "Didn't expect to see you out here." I tilted my head, propping myself up on one elbow, and pushed the sunglasses back to rest atop my hair. My curls spilled loose, brushing my neck. "Thought I'd steal some peace," I replied, keeping my tone light, casual. "You're back early, huh?" He grinned, a flash of white teeth against sun-browned skin, and took a swig from his bottle. "Yeah, wrapped up finals a week ago. Figured I'd surprise Mom." His gaze didn't waver, sliding over me. My legs stretched out, the dip of my waist, the rise and fall of my breath under the bikini top. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't shy. My pulse kicked up, a quick thud against my ribs, and I shifted slightly, crossing one ankle over the other. I should have reached for the towel draped over the chair beside me, pulled it tight around myself and waved him off, but I didn't. Something in the way he looked at me, like I was more than the neighbor lady who'd waved hello at barbecues, kept me rooted there, letting the moment stretch. "Looks like you're making the most of it," he said, nodding toward the pool. The water sparkled behind me, catching the light in lazy ripples. "Hot as hell out here today." "Tell me about it," I said, letting a small smile curve my lips. I brushed a bead of sweat from my collarbone, my fingers lingering there a beat too long. His eyes followed the motion, and I felt the weight of it, a slow burn that had nothing to do with the sun. "You holding up over there?" "Barely," he laughed, a sound that rumbled deep in his chest. He stepped closer to the fence, resting his forearms on the top rail, his biceps tensing under the strain. "Might need to borrow that pool if it gets any worse." I raised an eyebrow, tipping my glass toward him. "It's a free country, Lucas. Just don't expect me to play lifeguard." His grin widened, and for a second, we just stared, the air between us thickening with something unspoken. I knew him, or I'd thought I did. The gangly kid who'd mowed lawns for extra cash, always trailing behind his mom at block parties. But this wasn't that kid. This was a man, all sharp angles and quiet confidence, watching me like he'd stumbled onto something he wasn't ready to let go of. And me? I was a woman who'd built a life on control, on knowing the lines and never crossing them. Yet here I was, letting his gaze trace me, feeling the heat of it settle somewhere low and dangerous. The pool lapped softly at its edges, a steady rhythm that matched the quickening beat of my heart. The afternoon sun climbed higher, turning my backyard into a shimmering oven, but I stayed by the pool, a paperback splayed open on my lap. The words blurred under my gaze. I wasn't reading, not really. My attention kept drifting to the fence, where Lucas had disappeared after our little exchange. I told myself it was nothing, just neighborly chatter, but the way his eyes had lingered stuck with me, like a song I couldn't shake. I adjusted my sunglasses, the frames cool against my temples, and took another sip of iced tea. The ice long melted into a tepid puddle. Then I heard it, the creak of the gate. I glanced up, and there he was, strolling into my yard like he owned it, a toolbox swinging from one hand. His tank top was still plastered to his chest, the gray fabric dark with sweat, and his cargo shorts hung low on his hips, showing off the lean lines of his frame. He caught me looking and flashed that grin again, the one that felt like a dare. "Pool light's been flickering, right?" he said, nodding toward the water. "Saw it last night from my window. Figured I'd take a look." I set the book down, folding my arms across my chest, the bikini top shifting slightly under the motion. "Didn't know you were keeping tabs on my pool, Lucas." He shrugged, setting the toolbox on the deck with a soft clank. "Hard not to notice. Besides, I'm good with my hands. Thought I'd save you the trouble." I let that hang in the air, my lips twitching into a half-smile. "All right, handyman. Knock yourself out." He crouched by the pool's edge, pulling a screwdriver from the box, and got to work. The muscles in his shoulders rolled as he twisted the casing open, his fingers steady and sure. I watched from my lounger, legs stretched out, the sun warming my skin. The clink of metal against metal filled the quiet, punctuated by the occasional grunt as he wrestled with a stubborn screw. Sweat beaded on his brow, one drop sliding down the side of his face, catching the light before it disappeared into the collar of his shirt. I caught myself staring at the curve of his jaw, the way his hair stuck to his forehead, and snapped my eyes back to the book, flipping a page I hadn't read. "You've got a good setup here, Grace," he said after a while, not looking up from his work. "Quiet, private. Bet it's nice to unwind out here." I tilted my head, resting my chin on my hand. "Sometimes too quiet. A little company doesn't hurt." He paused, glancing over his shoulder, his hazel eyes catching mine. "That an invitation?" "Take it how you want," I said, keeping my voice light. But there was an edge to it, a spark I couldn't quite douse. He chuckled, low and warm, and turned back to the light, twisting a wire into place. The banter felt easy, but underneath it, something simmered, something I wasn't ready to name. He stood a few minutes later, wiping his hands on his shorts, and stepped closer to grab a wrench from the toolbox. His arm brushed mine as he passed, a fleeting graze of skin on skin, warm and rough from the day's heat. I froze, my breath hitching just enough to notice. He didn't pull back right away, letting the contact linger a beat too long before stepping away. My pulse thudded in my ears, loud against the lazy drone of cicadas in the trees. "Almost done," he said, crouching again, but his tone had shifted, less casual, more deliberate. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, you know." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back on my hands. "Fixing the light?" He grinned, not looking up. "Sure, let's go with that." I laughed, a soft sound that slipped out before I could stop it, and he shot me a look, playful, but with a glint that made my stomach tighten. I shifted on the lounger, crossing my legs, the bikini bottom tugging slightly against my hips. He was just a kid, I reminded myself, barely 22, home from college, still wet behind the ears. Except he wasn't. Not with that build, that confidence, the way he held my gaze like he knew exactly what he was doing. I picked up my glass, swirling the last of the tea, and took a slow sip, letting the coolness steady me. "Looks like you're holding up fine," I said, nodding at the light as it flickered back to life. He stood, brushing his hands together, and stepped closer, towering over me just enough to cast a shadow across my legs. "Told you I'm good with my hands." His voice dropped, teasing, and his eyes flicked over me again. Bold, unapologetic. I felt the heat of it settle in my chest, a slow burn I couldn't ignore. I should have sent him back over the fence, thanked him, and shut the gate. But I didn't. I just smiled, small and sharp, and let the moment hang there, heavy and alive. The evening air cooled just enough to make the deck bearable, and I stood in my kitchen, sliding a tray of appetizers into the oven. My black sundress hugged my frame, the fabric soft against my skin, ending just above my knees in a way that felt elegant but not too stiff. I'd swept my hair into a loose bun, a few strands curling free to brush my neck, and swiped on a touch of lipstick, coral bold enough to catch the eye. The neighborhood gathering wasn't anything formal, just a handful of familiar faces. But I liked playing hostess, liked the hum of voices filling my house. I moved through the dining room, setting out glasses and lighting candles, the flickering glow dancing across the polished table. The doorbell chimed, and soon the room buzzed with chatter. Mrs. Carter from down the street, the Hendersons with their endless golf stories, a few others. I glided between them, offering smiles and refilling drinks, the clink of crystal a steady rhythm. Then I saw him, Lucas, stepping in behind his mom, who'd insisted he tag along. He'd traded the tank top for a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the fabric stretching across his shoulders. His dark hair was tamed, just enough to look intentional, and his hazel eyes found me across the room, sharp and steady. I nodded a quick hello, turning to pour a glass of wine, but I felt him watching, the weight of it tugging at me. Dinner started, and somehow, maybe not somehow, maybe he'd planned it, he ended up right across from me. The long table gleamed with plates and silverware, the candlelight casting shadows that played over his face. I leaned forward to pass the bread, and our fingers brushed, a quick spark that made me pull back too fast. He didn't flinch, just gave me that half smile, the one that said he'd noticed. "You pull this off like it's nothing, Grace," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter, low enough that it felt meant just for me. "Impressive." I met his gaze, resting my elbow on the table, my glass hovering near my lips. "Years of practice," I said, letting my smile tilt. "You're not so bad yourself. Clean up nice." His grin widened, and he took a sip of water, his throat working as he swallowed. Henderson droned on about her new patio set, but it faded to static. Our eyes locked over the flickering candles, and the room seemed to shrink, the air between us tightening. Then I felt it, his foot nudging mine under the table, a slow, deliberate press of his shoe against my sandal. My breath caught, sharp and sudden, and I froze, the warmth of it creeping up my leg. It wasn't an accident, I could have moved, could have laughed it off, but my foot stayed there, pressed back just enough to answer him. He leaned back in his chair, casual as anything, joining the conversation with a joke about the heat wave. I laughed, a little too loud maybe, my fingers tightening around my glass. The contact broke, but a minute later it happened again, his leg brushing mine, the fabric of his jeans rough against my bare skin. My pulse jumped, a quick thud that echoed in my chest, and I shifted slightly, uncrossing my legs. The hem of my dress slid up an inch, and I saw his eyes flick down, then back up, fast but not fast enough. A flush crept up my neck, hot and telling, and I took a long sip of wine to cover it, the coolness doing nothing to steady me. "So, Lucas," I said, steering us back to safer ground, "how's college treating you these days?" He tilted his head, resting his forearms on the table, the shirt pulling tight across his chest. "Good, keeps me busy. But it's nice to be back here, familiar faces." His tone was light, but his look wasn't, lingering on me like I was the only face he meant. "Glad to hear it," I murmured, my voice softer than I'd intended. The Hendersons laughed at something, glasses clinking in a toast, but it all blurred. His foot found mine again, a slow slide this time, and I didn't pull away. My skin prickled, a shiver I couldn't blame on the AC, and I glanced down at my plate, pushing a bite of salad around with my fork. He was testing me, and I was letting him, letting the heat of it build under the table, hidden in plain sight. I looked up, meeting his eyes, and gave him a small smile, sharp and knowing. He smirked back, a flicker of triumph in it, and I knew we'd crossed a line neither of us could unsee. The night stretched out ahead, alive with the promise of more. The last of the guests trickled out, their voices fading into the night as car doors slammed and engines hummed down the street. I stood in the dining room, stacking plates, the clatter of china a faint echo against the stillness settling over the house. The candles had burned low, wax pooling on the tablecloth, and I blew them out, trails of smoke curling upward. Lucas lingered, helping his mom gather her purse and a leftover dish, but his eyes kept finding me, quick glances that stuck like burrs. When she stepped outside to take a call, he didn't follow. Instead, he drifted closer, his shadow stretching across the hardwood. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice low, almost too quiet for the empty room. I straightened, brushing my hands on my dress, the fabric rustling against my thighs. "I've got it. But if you're offering, there's a bottle of red in the basement I've been saving. Care to grab it?" His grin flashed, quick and sharp. "Lead the way." I turned, feeling the weight of his steps behind me as we descended the narrow stairs to my wine nook. A cool, dim corner of the house, lined with racks of polished wood and bottles glinting in the shadows. The air hit me first, crisp and still, a relief after the warm chaos upstairs. I flicked on a single bulb, its faint glow spilling over us, and pointed to a shelf. He reached for the bottle, his shirt riding up just enough to show a sliver of skin above his jeans, taut and sun-browned. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching him twist the label to read it. "Nice spot down here," he said, setting the bottle on a small table between us. "Feels like a secret." "It is," I replied, my voice echoing softly off the stone. "A place to hide from the world when it gets too loud." He nodded, stepping closer, the space between us shrinking. His fingers brushed the bottle's neck, then stilled. "What gets you, Grace?" he asked, his tone shifting, bold, but with a crack of something softer underneath. "What's irresistible?" I tilted my head, meeting his gaze, those hazel eyes steady and searching. The question hung there, heavy and alive, demanding more than a flippant answer. I uncrossed my arms, letting my hands rest on the edge of the table, the wood cool under my palms. "Confidence," I started, my voice low, deliberate. "A sharp mind, someone who can keep up, push back, make me think." I paused, feeling the air thicken. "And boldness. The guts to go after what you want, even when it's risky." His eyes lit up, a flicker of admiration cutting through the dimness. He leaned in slightly, elbows on the table, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy, warm, mingling with the musty air. "That's a hell of a list," he said, his lips twitching into a smile. "Anything else?" I hesitated, then let myself step off the ledge. "Intimacy," I said, my voice dropping to a husky whisper, the words brushing the silence. "Not just the physical, it's the connection. A spark that turns a touch into something that lights you up. A kiss that feels like it's pulling you home." I swallowed, my throat tight, and went further, reckless now. "And a man who knows what he's bringing to the table. No half measures." The last part slipped out, raw and unfiltered, and I felt heat rush to my cheeks, a flush I couldn't hide in the faint light. Lucas froze for a beat, then coughed, a quick surprise sound that broke into a grin. "Well, damn," he said, his voice quiet but steady, laced with a confidence that matched mine. "Good thing I've got no shortage there." A laugh bubbled up from my chest, soft and unexpected, cutting through the tension like a blade. He laughed too, a low rumble that filled the space, but his eyes didn't leave mine. They darkened, the playfulness giving way to something deeper, hungrier. My breath hitched, and I gripped the table harder, steadying myself. The air felt charged, electric, like a storm rolling in slow. We'd laid ourselves bare, me with my wants, him with his quiet claim, and it shifted something between us, a lock clicking into place. For a long moment we just stood there, the silence wrapping around us like a cloak. Shadows clung to the edges of the room, the bottle forgotten on the table. I could have stepped back, poured the wine, steered us upstairs to safer ground, but I didn't. His gaze held mine, a question in it, a promise, and I gave him a small nod. Barely a movement, but enough. He straightened, closing the gap another inch, and I felt the pull of him, a gravity I wasn't ready to fight. We turned together, climbing the stairs back to the world above, the echo of our words trailing behind us, a thread tying us tighter with every step.